New media have had many effects on the culture and lifestyles of diverse populations throughout the world. In this paper, I will explore a few of the interesting effects the new media have had on the digital generation, also known as millennials or Generation Y. Narrowing the scope of the impact of new media to just this one group brings up a few salient issues that stand in sharp relief. Constant access to technology and new media seeping into every aspect of life have been defining characteristics for the group of people born between the period of 1980 and 1997. Access to these technologies have produced interesting changes in this group's way of thinking. As compared to the members of Generation X and the baby boomer generation before them, among the three, this group is unique because access to the internet and the enormous wealth of the free flow of information across the platform have always been a part of their lives, rather than being important new innovations that created changes to already ingrained ways of living, thinking, and interacting with one another. This unique perspective has led to interesting generation defining characteristics. For example, Generation Y has been characterized as being more skeptical, blunt, and impatient relative to their predecessors, arguably due to being raised in an environment of information transparency and dominated by technologies that offer instant gratification. These noted characteristics have created both positive and negative effects on the people directly affected. Bolton et al. 2013. It seems that the near limitless access to information that can be consumed and digested in private and discussed without the expected social pleasantries associated with face to face communication have changed the flow of social interaction. The instant gratification of instant access to vast, deep, and wide stores of information have led to a characteristic focus on brevity and straightforward dealing that can be seen as a new societal trend, one important to note on a global scale, that is changing the expectations for communications in the private and public spheres. Generation Y can be broadly characterized by the use of new media to create a connection to communities and a sense of identity within their social structures. The echo chamber of social media can create important modes of self reflection, as users have the capacity to see their own image as others see them. This can create a positive psychological effect and a sense of self gratification that contributes to the overall well being. Valkenburg et al. 2006. It is important to note that this role has been filled in previous generations through social clubs, sporting leagues, business and veteran organizations, and a myriad of other social networks. It appears that the rise of new media is not creating a new innate desire to achieve a sense of identity and community, but is rather a new tool that is becoming quite prominent in meeting a deep human need to create a sense of identity and connection. The strengthening of community bonds through new media and the above characterized skeptical, blunt, and impatient personality traits have changed the world of marketing goods and services to consumers significantly differently. As well, according to one source, advertising revenues for many above the line media have slowed in growth or even declined in recent years, whereas several forms of digital interactive advertising, in particular mobile and social media, the impact of consumer to consumer communication has been greatly magnified in the marketplace. Dufay, 2017. This creates an interesting feedback loop between content creators, advertisers, content consumers, and new media platforms. Indeed, the dominant model of content creators being a distinct and generally non responsive group has been shaken up entirely in the new media landscape. A new model is constantly being introduced and renovated on the fly, practically in real time. We are all familiar with the latest and greatest media platform becoming obsolete and comically irrelevant in just a few years from their introduction. And this trend stands in sharp contrast to the old media model of a few stalwart institutions controlling the landscape of content dissemination for a generation at a time. This observation speaks directly to the powerful effect new media have had on all forms of traditional media. Conventional forms of communications were once heavily centralized. and the message they put out into the culture were shaped heavily by an editorial voice that has become more and more irrelevant as new media takes the center stage for the digital generation. As advertising revenues for traditional media have declined sharply in recent years, corporations have been considering how to deal with an ever-shifting landscape where end users create and shape conversations around content that circumvents a universal, centralized editorial voice. Television, radio, movies, newspapers, records, and magazines have been overtaken by Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn, and other platforms where end users generate their own content, as well as disseminate information on brands that they may comment on and shape in their own ways. In summary, we have looked at a few pertinent changes that the rise of new media has created for the digital generation. Namely, 1. The access to near limitless information has certainly affected the overall tone of social interactions in ways that are important to the character of Generation Y, as well as the perception of members of the digital generation. 2. The use of new media, particularly social networking websites, to cement ties to community and a sense of identity for members of the digital generation. A groundswell shift from old media to new media as the rise of digital generation has both shaped new media and culled old media sources as they have been faced with the challenge to adapt or perish. This has shaped the digital generation by creating a new relationship, a symbiosis between content creators and consumers.